Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third CME Palooza Fall session of the day, and the session that I think has the best name, Death of the MECC, Fact or Fiction? I'm sure there's a bunch of you out there who are hoping the answer to that question is fiction. So let me go run through our intro slides really quick here, and then I will turn this over to Jan. So as I already said, Death of the MECC, Fact or Fiction. This session is sponsored by MedPage Today. Big thanks to them. And it's moderated by Jan Perez. Our sponsors, again, our gold sponsor, Genentech. Silver sponsors, iMedics, MedPage Today. And our bronze sponsors, Semiology, Educational Measures, Highmark CE, Impact Education, MedEdicus, RedMedEd, and I'm going to try to say this right this time, Vivacity Consulting. Aaron, you can let me know if I did that right this time. Okay, our 3 ways to ask questions, and we really encourage you to ask questions. It's been going great so far the first 2 sessions with a good amount of questions. So 3 ways you can do it. 1, you can use the MedPage Today text line, the number 267-6660-CME. You can also click on the Google Q&A link, which is located at the bottom of each of the videos. You should be able to see it there. And you'll need to have a Google Plus account in order to do that. And lastly, you can also tweet your question using the CME Palooza hashtag. And I will be monitoring those questions and interjecting every once in a while. Here's our speaker disclosure slide. As always, opinions are those of the individuals, not their companies. And here is our panel today. And at this point, I will introduce Jan. Jan is one of the founders and managing partners of CME Outfitters and has been an active member of the CME community through the Alliance, MECC, and Healthcare Business Women's Association. So Jan, I will turn it over to you to introduce the rest of the panel at this point.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and good morning. It's funny that you bring up, Derek, the title of the session, because when you and Scott first approached me about this and gave me the title, my first reaction was, well, that's going to be a Debbie Downer session. You know, that doesn't sound very positive. But then as I thought about it, I'm thinking, you know what? It depends. You know, it really can go either way. And the last, 3 to 5 years have been difficult for MECCs. It's, you know, we've all gone through a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges. And actually, if you are here in this session, you've come out the other end. And that shows that, you know, you've been able to evolve, and that's really where the depends comes in. You know, your ability and our ability to evolve, to change, to pivot when necessary is really where the fiction comes in rather than the fact. Because again, we've all seen colleagues and MECCs over the last few years that are no longer with us. So being able to adapt and being able to evolve, in my opinion, is the key. You know, every now and then you get a speaker, you go to a session, and you always hope, at least I do, when I go to a meeting, if I can come away with 1 or 2 nuggets, I'm going to be really happy about this. And last spring I went to the CBI meeting and came out with a lot more nuggets. Scott Weber had set up a speaker. His name was Bill Levisay from Bold House Farms. And he really said some things that spoke to me, and spoke to me as a business owner, as a CME educator, and as well as somebody who's involved in the MECC community. And a couple of things that were particularly poignant for me. What made you great may be your downfall. And I think that is so huge in our ability to evolve as MECCs. What made us great could be our downfall, because if we do stay stagnant, nothing else, you know, we're going to run into trouble. And then it was very interesting because just this week in the op-ed section of the Wall Street Journal, there was an article about pioneers. And the perception that if you are a pioneer, you're first to market, you're the first one out there, you're the one who came up with the ideas, that you are going to be the successful one. And if you look across technology, if you look across a lot of different industries, the pioneers aren't necessarily the market leaders. And one of the reasons why is sometimes pioneers, they're so attached to that idea, so attached to their mission and their strategy, they're unwilling to give it up. And by unwilling to give it up, unwilling to adapt with the market and your customer, is going to mean that you aren't going to be a pioneer anymore, you're going to be yesterday's news. And so really excited about this panel today, and we've got some great panelists. And not only will they have a lot of great insights, there's three people that I really respect. They've come through the other side, and they've been successful during a really tumultuous time for us in CME Outfitters. So I really look forward to their insights in this panel. So first off, ladies first, we've got Marissa Seligman from Clinical Care Options. Many of you know Marissa as the president and chief operating officer of CCO. But Marissa's been a leader in the MECC community for many, many years. My mentor as the MECC section leader way back when, involved with NAMEC, involved with the Alliance, an editor of the Almanac. So we all know Marissa very well, and she's been great, as I said, a great mentor to me. Also, Ted Bruno, Chief Medical Officer of the France Foundation. Ted is a physician. He was trained as a family physician, practiced for 10 years at Kaiser Permanente in Connecticut, and has been involved for the last 14 in CME. He's been with 2 different accredited MECs and is now with the France Foundation as the Chief Medical Officer. And Ted is also on the Finance Committee of the Alliance. And then finally, Daniel Guinea, Executive Vice President in Strategy and Innovation at ASIM, a medical education and publishing company in New Jersey. Daniel's also been very active in education, and he is the co-chair for the NCCME Communications Committee. And again, Daniel's got a favorite quote, very good for today: even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you stand still. So I think these are some welcome to my panel members, and we want to frame this discussion today as a SWOT analysis, and not to get bogged down in process and everything, but really when you think about it, our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats can either be the thing that makes us successful or the thing that makes us fall. And so we'd like to go through this, and we're going to do this I'm going to introduce this. We're going to take about 8 minutes per letter and section, and Marissa, Daniel, and Ted are going to kind of give their insights. And one of the other things is we've got a good mix of small MECs, medium-sized MECs, and certainly large. So each has their own challenges. Each has different issues that they are dealing with. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to make it work in this changing environment. So first, we're going to deal with strengths. Let's not pat ourselves on the back too much, but we do want to go through it because I do think and I do believe strongly that we as MECs are the innovators, are the people who bring the strengths to the table in CME. So we're going to kick it off with Ted. Ted, what are the strengths that MECs have in order to really continue to be successful in this business?
Well, thanks, Jan. I mean, I think for the majority of the MECs, as you sort of said, we've kind of come out the other end here. That we remain in operation today mainly because we remain relevant and strategic. I think relevant from the standpoint of you made a comment before when we were talking about we need to change, but at the same time we got to be nervous all the time. Kind of as Daniel said, if we don't move, we're going to get run over. And strategic really being part of the solution to the educational needs of the healthcare community and the team in this ever-changing environment. And we really need to kind of be moving with the times as we have been over the past few years. I think the other real strength of the MECs is really we have overall teams that can be really dedicated to the project or to the initiative and sort of the overall management of it. We, I think, as MECs can be really nimble and responsive and efficient with the teams that are working within CME initiatives, and we know that can't really be underestimated. We can create grants, we can publish the outcomes. So I think I heard from a colleague who was at the CVI meeting that Scott Weber made a comment about, we can put grants together in 30 days, but publishing sort of is where we need to kind of work on. In the complex collaborations, I think that that often many of us are involved in, that the MECs are really the ones that kind of keep that project moving. I've heard issues about doctors being like herding cats, but CME providers are right up there too. We've also heard stories about projects that I can't believe they actually occur, but projects that never get off the ground or that they're canceled. I can't imagine that ever really happens in the MECC world, at least ones that are still around. So really kind of tying into those attention to details, that's what keeps us up at night, at least with the accredited MECs. And I think perhaps we have that higher level of scrutiny than maybe some of the other sectors, or at least maybe that's like self-imposed scrutiny, but I think that really plays into kind of why we're there. And lastly, before I turn it over to our other panelist here, is really, I think, maybe not so much the first generation MECs. I was thinking about this because I think at the time, years ago, MECs said we could do it all. We can do it from beginning to end. But I suspect now a lot of the MECs have become matchmakers. And I think we have to create these collaborations that are out there. I think it's from the fact that perhaps we've been around for a while, we've met people along the way, we've been across different CME sectors and groups, and can really sort of turn really impactful medical education initiatives. And looking to sort of how can we take that process, and we know that at the same point sometimes these collaborations can really get bogged down in some political issues and in the same silos that occur within larger organizations and medical societies can bog us down and do progress. But those are some thoughts I had, and I'd be interested to hear from my other panelists.
Okay. Daniel, what's your thought?
So, I mean, I think Ted said a number of important points there, but I think one critical factor, at least for a small MEC like we are, is just the need to survive. I mean, we need to do what it takes. We need to be flexible. We need to be nimble, respond to opportunities, understand and learn from the past. What's been successful? What wasn't successful? How can we improve it? Is there anything we can see what's out there? What else is successful that's out in the community? So I just think that need to survive. There's no guarantee that as a standalone, we don't have a budget that's supporting us. We don't have a larger organization that's saying, well, here's a guaranteed baseline to work from, and if we can get revenues above that, that's a great thing. No, if the revenues don't come in, we say goodbye. So I think I would just say that need to survive is probably the biggest strength of the MEC.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. Marissa, what are your thoughts?
Thanks for both of those terrific thoughts, and actually thank you also for having this panel, Janet, putting us together. It's a wonderful discussion on who we are, and really who we are is just as both Ted and Daniel said, is that we're survivors, but we're also thrivers, and I think that it's really important that we do pat ourselves on the back on that, and that we are here living to tell the tale and living to evolve what we do. I think that what MECs bring uniquely into the education space is diversity. We are extremely different organizations, as both Daniel and Ted tapped into, and that diversity allows us to learn from each other and also work together in ways that other organizations or other industries perhaps could not. That diversity is reflected in the fact that we are not linked to one institution or one organization, one collaboration. We can work with faculty and providers and other and experts from the broad expanse of our world. And by doing that, we're free from limitations on practice type or institution or even geography. We can expand all of that and bring together education that's needed, and yet be regional as well. If we have to do a regional focused program, a locally focused program, we can do that. And I think that by having that broad vision and a broad expanse and our abilities to be so broad, that is a really very unique attribute of MECs.
It's interesting when you go back to Daniel's thought about needing to survive. You would think that if it was a group that could go down at any moment, is dependent on every grant, and really needs to survive, that it would be also a group that wasn't willing to take risks. And I think that that's quite the opposite. And one of the things that is an advantage of a MEC is that willingness and that entrepreneur attitude and willingness to take risk. And also, while some of them succeed, there are things that fail and don't go so well. And the ability to fail well, or the willingness to fail well, is really very much a part of our whole being, in the sense of you got to be able to put yourself out there, and you've got to learn from your mistakes, but that taking those risks is very, very important, and it's a strength of MECs where you might not find that in other provider groups. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on to weaknesses. And this is the one that, we always kind of have that self-reflection. We don't want to do introspection and say, well, it's not me, it's somebody else. We got to be able to be critical. And one of the most great lines from this presentation at CBI from Bill Levisay was, be on your best day, be nervous. On your worst day, be more nervous. And I think that that's not to be a nervous Nelly all the time, but what that says is be continually critical of what you're doing, be continually looking internally to what you're doing, and don't allow those weaknesses to kind of just keep going. So Daniel, we're going to start with you on this one. Tell us about, what are some of the weaknesses, what trip us up as MECs, probably maybe most often?
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of like you were saying, just that we need the ability to look in the mirror and identify, sure, certainly the good things. Hey, what looks good, what's working, but it's got to be an honest assessment of, hey, is this working or is that not working? So trying to live in the good old days and just rely on, oh, this is what we did, this is what got us here, hey, we were the first ones to do this. We're the initiators, like you said, we're the pioneers. That's not enough to rest on your laurels. So I would say a definite weakness or challenge is are we accurately assessing what we've done well and what we haven't. So living up to that need to survive. We can't just hang on to the good old days and say, but this is always the way it was. So I mean, I think that's it. Kind of in a nutshell.
Okay, Marissa.
Tapping into that is the strength. I often say your weaknesses are your strengths turned against you, and in that line with that, MECC being so diverse and in so many different areas, we really have to be critical, not in a negative way, but in an introspective and almost curious way. What are you doing well? What are others doing, and how are they doing that? And assessing that against what you can bring to the table, and do you want to go into that or not? I think Stephen Jobs said that one of the most important things in running companies and running your business is the ability to say yes, of course, but it's also the ability to say no and determine what you won't do. And perhaps in line with that, what you won't do, perhaps you can work with someone in turning that weakness into a strength, working in a collaborative way with another organization. I think one of the things that we as MECs have kind of born over the years has been a negativity about the environment that we live in and market factors. We're very transactional, and that can be very difficult to plan around. But we have to embrace that. That is the environment in which we live, and work with ways that we can pursue opportunities and overcome barriers that are presented, not again in negative ways, but this is the reality in which we live. And a third weakness, I think, is because of the changes in our industry, it's been really hard to get people into what we do. Succession planning is challenging, to get really good people into the organization at an early level so that you can build them into what you do and plan and mentor them, which is so critically important. So I think that we have to really engage people coming out of schools and out of both training programs in the healthcare professions and in others to really come into our business and help us build it.
Before we move on to Ted, I'm just encouraged to the audience out there, if you have input or ideas that you want to throw out there, please still put them in the question section, tweet them, and Derek will get them over to us. You don't have to wait till the last minute or the last part to ask questions. But if you have some inputs and some ideas that you think are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats in this area, please feel free to enter them into the question section, and we'll take them as we go. Okay, Ted, take us away.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this, but kind of that definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping to get different results, right? So that's we talked about it, you got to survive, but it's hard to be innovative. You're kind of plugging along with projects, and at the same time you have to innovate and keep going. It's I think it was I don't know if it was Jack Keyes or Don Moore talking about sort of the change in CME, where it's the plane. You're basically trying to build a plane as it's going 500 miles an hour. So it's really hard. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. So I think that's a weakness. Another thing I think, maybe not so much now, but in the past good old days, back in the early 2000s, where I think some MECs were sort of very specialized into only certain therapeutic areas. But then you get into the issue with, and I don't think it just happens with MECs. I've seen it happen with medical specialty societies who are sort of, they're kind of targeted into one area, but you have to look at those educational grants from that therapeutic lifestyle cycle issues. So we've talked about sort of diversification. I think most MECs out there now are kind of more diversified. And I think Jen, you mentioned that, but we have to sort of fail, but fail and take learnings out of there. I mean, I think if we look at a few years ago when PICME came out and everybody said, well, PICME is going to be the future, and while it's still pertinent, it didn't sort of kick off like everyone thought. So those are things. And I think the other thing is the MECs I think are coming up to the plate more and more, but the MECs need to be part of the CME solution and partner with others.
Mm-hmm. And that it's kind of a weakness. Well, not so much a weakness, but a challenge is that that not having that ability to, we have to go out and partner with people because we don't have that ingrown ability to have partners, whether it's for QI, whether it's for having a closed group of physicians in there. And so that forces us, and again, it's that weakness and opportunity that it was a weakness that we don't have that group of physicians that are learners all the time, but it requires us then to kind of step out of our box and go after those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could throw in too, Jan, something else in listening to Marissa and Ted talk, it's, is there a challenge to us, or a weakness of maybe of the MECs is that kind of running after the fodder that's in the trough, of the pharma companies, and is our mission to go find the funds that might be out there, and just create a proposal that matches up with the latest QI or the PICME when that was in vogue, and and there was a conversation about this at during the Alliance meeting recently, and after hours, it was an interesting concept, like, is our mission, what are we loyal to our mission? Are we here to educate? Is it about identifying educational needs and opportunities, or do we just run from trough to trough as the pharma company, funds dictate? So I think that's a real weakness as well that MECs can run into.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, just as you were saying that, we got a question that came in. It said, I think the general assumption is that the majority of medical education companies' revenues tied to industry support. Can any of you speak to having a different model, i.e. non-traditional support sources, government, payers, etc.? Has anyone had experience with non-traditional support sources? Marissa, maybe you?
Oh, yes, I have. And it actually was going to be, that segues into the next one, which is opportunities, which is everything is changing. So no business is the same. That's the government business, the healthcare business. I mean, even to non-traditional kind of funders that you'd be looking at, beyond pharma and device, they are changing their business models as well. And it is extremely challenging to be part of a per pay program for clinicians, particularly physicians. They have been given a lot of free CME, and to have them pay for their own CME is something that continually presents challenges. But I think there is evolution in that area. But it is not a short-term win, and this is where the cycle that we've got into, which is for grants, there's a set. Here it is, we get the funding, then we build, and then we have them come, and we're done. And then we go into the next one. Those kind of pay relationships, if you will, are not short-term. You have to really have a very long and extended relationship with the clinician to continue to engage them, because they are putting up more than just their time, they're putting up their funds. So you have to have a very separate strategy for that. It can be done, I've done it successfully, but it is a different model. You can't put it into the same framework as a grants model.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing on the government. The government has, working in government applications, I'm sure Ted and Daniel can comment on, as well as you, Jan, as well, is that it's a lot. You have to, of course, be a government-approved vendor, and then you have to go and put the application in and get weighed, and you have no idea when the decision is going to come, really, and if you'll be part of that. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of variability in those, but it is worthwhile to pursue if you feel that you can make that commitment, and that is really part of your strategic outlook. You have to say, if we're going to be in this, you have to really be in it. It's not something that you can come in and out of, in my experience.
Well,
yeah, I would say that, similar, I think it goes back to the partnership and collaborations that you make. We're involved with one that we hope to hear soon, but it's a government grant, and I think that there's some opportunities in the government. I know that the Alliance Foundation is looking into this, and I think there's some really great opportunities that perhaps the Alliance Foundation can actually lead. I don't think any one sector within our group can actually do it by themselves, even if you're government approved. But I think there's some really great opportunities, and we'll see if anything comes out of that.
Agree.
Yeah, and I could throw in too the insurance companies, are Aetna, Cigna, Horizon here in New Jersey. They've established foundations that offer grants as well. I mean, it's a very similar process to the pharma approach. A lot of times they'll specify even what areas they're interested in supporting as well. And it can be a long, drawn-out process. We waited about 6 months or so to hear back from an insurer that was quote-unquote very interested. So, but that's another opportunity as well. I mean, there are other sources of funding out there, but just identifying them, having the wherewithal to go after them, qualifying in the case of government applications. There's a lot of other considerations, but there are opportunities.
Okay. Well, let's use that as our segue.
Hey, Jan, actually, before you segue,
okay.
I have a question that came in that I think relates to the W part of the analysis. So the question is, there seems to be less partnering among MECs. Agree or disagree? Is this simply a result of lower budgets and less willingness to share?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Yes, I don't agree either. Sorry. I think that there's a lot of partnering going on and collaboration. So.
Yeah. And I think it goes along with, I'm not sure if it was Daniel or if it was Ted that said, there was a time where you kind of felt like this was your therapeutic area, this is what you did, or tried to do it all. And you can't do it all. You can't do anything. So that partnering, whether it's a technology partnership, whether it is a format partnership, whatever it might be, is really important, in my opinion. And I think that they're still alive and well.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually in our organization, the France Foundation, I think we've actually been doing more collaboration. We've always collaborated, but I think more and more, and yeah, they are not inexpensive to do. But I think at the end of the day, you get a better outcome. But you have to do it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say one thing though? Just on the observation of the questioner, there is something that we know of course, is the regression to the mean, in that as our arena, as MECs have evolved, our capabilities, capacities, expertise has increased. And so whereas organizations perhaps weren't providing the kind of service and support or insights that they were 5 years ago, to be in this business, to not only survive but to thrive, you have to pick your business up, and then there are others who were out ahead of the curve, if you will, had to ratchet on back to go to where their financial funding, if you will, or financial path was. So the regression of the mean does lift the boats in our industry, so that it could be where you would have partnered before with someone who was providing a unique capability. Now these organizations have built them themselves, so they may not be partnering in the same way, but I still see a lot of partnerships and collaboration between them.
Yeah, and I wonder if the question isn't partially geared towards the notion of, so here we are, for example, 4 MECs. And I mean, is the question asking, is CME Outfitters and Clinical Options and ASIM and the France Foundation all going to get together and collaborate on a grant proposal? I mean, I don't know, that hasn't happened to date, at least among us 4. But if the question is that way, I mean, that's kind of different. I mean, certainly ASIM collaborates all the time with accredited providers, with service providers, with audience generation, with audiovisual. But I don't know if the question is, do we, maybe it's an 800-pound gorilla in the room, but are MECs getting together with other MECs who essentially provide the same services and capabilities? But why 4 MECs would need to get together who all develop content? I'm not sure that there's a tremendous value in that, but maybe it's happening, and maybe it can happen more. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to opportunities. There is no ability to affect yesterday and an infinite ability to affect tomorrow. And so looking at from a very positive perspective of where we can go, opportunities we can reach out to. Marissa, you started that, so I'll let you continue on in that arena. So let's talk about opportunities out there.
As I mentioned, everything is changing. I think that having post-college and college children has helped me understand, like, the top 5 jobs that are out there weren't even in existence 10 years ago. So everything changes, and healthcare is no exception. And in fact, the biggest opportunity, I think, is how we can align ourselves. And this sounds a little old, people have said it, but it continues to be true, I think, where it's aligning where the healthcare system is now focused. It used to be the physician only. The physician drove everything. And now it is really the team. It truly is the team. And who the team is focused on is the patient, and the patient is the healthcare system, whereas before everything was around that and all the providers within that system. But really it's the patient, and recognizing that and how we will be able to impact that, really looking at that business, how those businesses are changing, and mapping our education and the offerings to that, I think is an opportunity to really support the notion of healthcare value. And in line with this, providing valued education that helps link clinicians, patients, and the education that we are providing, and the support for that system, I think, will be incredibly important. And of course, the opportunity to always look, learn, and listen from others and hear, and the opportunity within our industry to share data and to share information. And Scott Weber at the CBI conference had a wonderful session. This was one in September, and it was about the ability to publish and disseminate our results, and to, again, provide not the information not just on the value we provide, but also how that links into healthcare. So
I think Scott's term is evangelize for CME, and I love that because it is important. It is important. It is important. Okay, Ted.
So, I mean, Marissa, I think you're right, and I think back to, I remember when I was in residency, and one of our clinical associate directors, who at the time I thought was a dinosaur, but I guess I'm getting closer to that age now, said that when he's had to learn 90% of what he learned in medical school all over again. And at the time you're thinking, what is he talking about? So fast forward to now I'm the dinosaur, and you look back, and so there's tons of opportunities. There'll always be opportunities that there used to be education. We're looking at it, as Marissa, you pointed out, we're really looking at sort of the patient-centered and used to be patient-centered. And looking at the quality issues. So if you can't, look at the acronyms in the quality arena. ACAs, ACOs, MCOs, MOCs, AHRQ, all these things, right? So if you can't find an acronym, in the old days it used to be ACC and OIG. That's what you used to be scared about. But now you have to worry about all these other ones. But how can you sort of, I talk about linking all of these together for the clinician, because they have all these things coming out after them. So you really need to kind of be in the mindset of where the clinician is, if we're looking at the physician at least. How do you sort of link all of these things together for them? So can educational opportunities exist there? And sort of, you have to really look. If it's not going to really impact patient care, then we shouldn't be doing it. It's not needed. And then I think, again, the opportunities that we've kind of mentioned is how do we combine our strengths and seek out those partners? And it may not be just the partners, as Daniel mentioned, with the audiovisuals or the outcomes groups, but really sort of looking at, and you mentioned, as MECC, we don't have access to the healthcare, we don't have direct access to the healthcare providers. So how do you partner with those groups that actually have access to either data or clinicians, and link these together? And this, as you said, really sort of, we've got to publish the outcomes.
Yeah. Daniel?
All right, my turn. So yeah, just I think the biggest thing is just being able, again, to learn. I mean, we're in the business of education. We need to be learners as well. So what can we learn from the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, in terms of what is successful, what is good education, and most importantly, what do our intended learners want? We really need to know our intended learners, and bring forth education that's applicable and relevant to them. And I think those are the great opportunities for us.
And we've got a lot of opportunity too. I think when we just open our eyes and look around, so often we get caught up in that competitive nature of you're a MECC, you're a MECC, you're a MECC. I've got to beat you, you and you and you. I'm competing with you. But at times step back and go, okay, what is my competitor doing? What are they doing that's different? What are they doing that's that hideous word, innovative, which just makes me crazy sometimes.
Everything's innovative, Jan.
Exactly. Oh, okay, I'm going to go with that. I want to be innovative, so I'm going to go with that. But, to step back and, be curious about what has made, another group successful. And that may not, it may not be the same thing that works for your team, and it may not be, but, keeping your mind open to what is going on there and being curious instead of being critical all the time, in the sense of, oh, they got the grant because XYZ, or they're doing this because of XYZ. No, let's step back. What are you doing? It's an opportunity to really evaluate your own processes, your own way of approaching things, and your own way of delivering. That I think it's an opportunity to be open. It's funny, in the last session, I didn't catch the whole thing, but I caught part of it, and they were talking about content, and they brought a patient, and then it was an interprofessional team, and the patient talked, and at the end, all of the providers, healthcare providers, said yes, the patient had the most impactful. Was the most important part of the discussion. But had the patient just been compliant, everything would have been fine. So that inability to say, well, maybe I didn't communicate it well, maybe I didn't ask the right questions or address the right issues, wasn't there. It was, well, the patient just needs to be compliant. And I think we all need to be that among our own individual teams, among those around us. There's an opportunity to just say, okay, what's going well, and look at what you can learn from others and implement in your own team.
Can I just say one other thing? If we have time, I went last night to a presentation by an individual named Thomas Lee. He's at Brigham and Women's Hospital. He's been actually very involved in healthcare and healthcare reform, and he's doing some other things. But one of the interesting points that he presented was about the patient perspective on clinicians and what they are looking for. And it's interesting, they are the 93,000 surveys later, of individuals later, if you will. What came up was this concept of relief of suffering in the patients, and peace of mind. And where I think that education can align with is not that physicians have to, or clinician teams have to have the answer, the cure-all, that we're going to extend life indefinitely, et cetera, but that the patient really knows that the healthcare team is connected in the same means to an end, to get the patient relief of suffering and to get them the best quality care that they can, given the circumstances that they have been dealt. And thinking about that, it really came into being for me, like how we can try to continue to put the patient at the focus, because the patient is the healthcare system, that bringing all these folks together to really create the end point of healthcare, which is, again, what patients want and what patients are really looking for, is that clinicians are speaking to one another, they are looking and really connected, they're communicating and connecting around that patient and being able to provide that coordinated care for that patient. So it was a very thought-provoking talk.
I do have a question from the audience for the panel. Question is, how are your organizations managing the growing expectations to be experts in all facets of continuing healthcare education? For example, education design, outcomes assessment, analysis, publications, etc.
Yeah. Ted, I'll throw that one to you. You're on the hot seat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of it just goes with experience, and then again, if you don't, I think that's where the MECCs need to kind of look internal and say, where are we lacking? If you're lacking in that capability, or you need that resource, you either have to go hire it, contract it, or go partner with somebody who can provide that too. Again, sometimes maybe easier said than done.
Yeah, I think just knowing, again, going back, knowing our strengths and weaknesses. One of the things that we do is look at, based on the proposal, based on the intended audiences, based on the scope of the education, do we have the horses in the barn to do this, or do we need to look out and and contact an outcomes provider maybe who's got more depth, who's got more whatever it might be, who could do a better job, and how are we most effectively going to get this done? And honestly, it goes back to what's going to make it the most appealing proposal. If the intent is industry support, it's got to be an appealing, compelling proposal, right? So, I think that's one thing that ASIM does. Certainly, for certain given programs, we can do it all. For most, we're looking for collaborations. We're looking for partnerships. We can't, frankly, deliver the audience participation that a number of audience generation providers can. So, you know what? We're going out for help. So, I mean, I think that's, again, it just goes back to knowing your strengths and weaknesses and where your opportunities are.
Yeah, and Marissa, you guys do a really good job of this in the sense of, using outside groups to help you. Even, and I've really admired the way you've used your faculty to get in there and roll their sleeves up. So I'm going to throw it over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that really is the hallmark. I think that to respond to the questioner, I don't know that the expectation is from funders, whoever they are, that everything is in-house. I think the expectation is that you will put together the team from in-house and external resources that can do it best. And your job, your role as the MEC is to bring it all together and deliver on the commitments that you made by bringing all these individuals together and to holding them up to really high standards and accountability. So it's not only saying that you can do it, but doing it and demonstrating how you do it, and then taking it to another program or to the next level for the next time. But I don't know that it's the expectation that the actual company needs to have all of that in-house. I'm not going to agree with that statement, so I don't know what that questionnaires experiences is, but that's not been mine.
But I think one of the most important things about that, and I agree that there's not that expectation, but it is the expectation that if you commit in a proposal to being able to deliver, then you need to deliver. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that becomes a challenge is, well, we can do that. Come on, guys, we can do that. You really need to know your strengths internally among your team and among your processes, because nobody wins if you think you can do something that you can't. You have to really have that awareness of when you need to go outside, whether it's audience generation, whether it's outcomes, whether it is, editorial. Know what your strengths are and bring in help when you need it.
Absolutely. Can I also say too, it's also the ability to say to yourself no. Yes. That you won't do it. If you feel you cannot bring them together, again, internally or externally or combination, then as a company, and it's really hard, I know this, to say no, but that
learning to say no is important.
Right. Better to say no and not be left with something that you cannot deliver upon. Mm-hmm. But then to say yes and have to deal with those outcomes. Okay.
All right, well, let's move on. We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about threats. What threatens our business? And there's the existence of the MECC, but it's also CME. There are things in life you can control, and there are things in life you can't control. And I think there are threats out there right now that are controllable and some that are not controllable. So, take us into threats, Ted. Kick us off.
Yeah, I think being able to adapt. We talked about adapt to the environment and to our external forces. I think we can control if we are knowledgeable about what's going on in the healthcare delivery system and who's doing what. I think that's really, really important. Maybe it's easier for me as a prior clinician, but really maybe the physician's the wrong one that we're educating. We talked about interdisciplinary education, and maybe we've got the wrong audience sometimes. Mm-hmm. I've sort of beat collaborations to death. I won't talk about that, but really kind of making sure that we're also there at the table. But things that we don't have control over, reduction in grant funding. We've been talking about this for years. Yes, the grant funding has been reduced, but it's still out there. You have to work harder on it. You have to work smarter on it. But I think in the end, if we look back at the France Foundation, I think we've become better at what we're doing because of the fact we've had to do that. Things that we don't have control over, government sanctions, the Physician Sunshine Act, and who knows where that's going. But and then maybe something that I've read about a little bit is will the currency of CME as we know it, as the AMA PR Category 1 credits, become obsolete at some point? And those are things that we may not be controlling that destiny whatsoever.
Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, but one of them is the value proposition of CME. Is it what it is we say it is? It's like when you get in your little insular community, of course, everyone kind of on the inside of the CME world is 100%. This is completely important. It must be here, and it's critical to continuing, for healthcare professionals. But what's the outside world think? What do physicians think? Is it just a matter of getting credits because that's what's mandated by my state, or is there truly value to what's being offered in continuing education? So I think the value proposition of CME is probably a tremendous threat. And then from an internal, company viewpoint, complacency, and kind of going back to what we were saying in the beginning of, well, this is what's worked, this is what's been good. We'll just kind of run with this, and let it run its course. I think any sort of complacency like that is certain to doom, whether it's an individual company or the enterprise as a whole.
Okay, Marissa?
I agree with all of those items from both Ted and Daniel. I think additionally, we are our own threat. Our ability to, our inability, let's say our ability to see the threats out there and our inability to think about ways to rise above them. Critics are always going to be there. Funding challenges are always going to be there. It's like any industry. There's not an ever-ending amount of funding. But there is opportunity, and we have to get above the negativity of the space that sometimes is around us and go beyond that, and really thinking thoughtfully, carefully, and considerately about what you are attempting to do, what you want to do, and applying them again into your strategy and into workings. I think that the threat we have is when we don't look longer term, and that's again us. We look short term. That not having a longer term view is very much of a threat to us individually and as a business group, as an industry, and we need to really look beyond that.
Yeah,
and advocate for what we do.
Yes, absolutely. That's really important, because threats, over the years, for those of us who've been in this business longer than we want to, as I told Derek, you can introduce me as the broad who's been there forever. But, we've gone through.
I opted not to do that.
And we'll go through many more as life comes. And I think you mentioned the Sunshine Act, and it's going to, if it continues on as it looks like it's going to go, and CME is not exempt, it's going to change things, so we adapt. It's going to change things until we figure out how to make it work, and then we will make it work, and we'll look back years ahead and wonder, oh gosh, why did we get so worried about that? And that's not to minimize it. It can be a big blow to us as a CME industry. But I guess my point is less about what the Sunshine Act itself will do as the threat that we will learn to overcome, and we will learn to work within the confines of what the deck has dealt us, and then that opportunity to move on and to be successful with it. So trying to look beyond it seems like we went through 2 or 3 years, or maybe even longer than that, of alliance meaning that, Chicken Little, the sky was falling. And it felt like maybe last year was one of the first years that the sky wasn't falling all the time. And we've got to get beyond the sky is falling okay, well, now what do we do? And move forward. And I think that is the opportunity that presents itself.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
Okay, Derek Dietz just sent in, how do we best advocate for MECCs? And who are our key target audiences? Anybody want to take that one?
Okay.
Go
All
for
right.
it.
Thank you, Derek. There you go. I think that it's doing things like we're doing now, that we tell people about them. I think it's important that faculty, for example, really know and are behind what we are doing and what we're achieving, and the differentiators for us than any other group in the CME space. I think we have to speak up. I think we have to publish. I think we have to communicate, and we have to also allow those publications to be distilled down also for the healthcare system to be better integrated, if you will, into the healthcare system so the patient sees it. So that you're having a listing of a clinician profile and all of the education, for example, that they partook in, and having that be accessible to patients, and having us be part of that could be something that, again, demonstrates to patients the value that we bring, as well as clinicians and others. So I think it's a matter of really having a voice, continuing to do what we do, doing not just innovation for innovation's sake, but for innovation because it really matters to the education that will ultimately matter to patient care.
And the other thing I would jump in on that is, MECCs, come back to the table. Marissa, you'll remember when we were heads of the MECC section together, we had ballrooms. The last few years, they've been boardrooms. And part of that is because there has been some change, and there are less people out there at the Alliance meeting that are from MECC. But there's also a level of apathy out there.
Agreed.
And I think if we are going to advocate for the group, the medical education companies, then we do need to have a voice, and that means we need to come together and discuss those. And it makes me sad when I go to the Alliance meeting the last couple of years, and there's just a handful of people in the room. It needs to, that voice can't. If everybody goes somewhere else or hangs out, whatever reason you're not there, then we're not going to have a voice.
Right. And that's why something like this, the CME Palooza, where we all are here together, is a great thing, because we are learning and sharing with each other. So these kind of activities, in lieu of other ones that have been lost, such as the AMA task force and the other meetings where we did get together and were able to advocate, in addition to the Alliance, where we did have a great showing and great participation at that time. But we need to think about different ways to pull us together and be able to share share the ideas and advocacy and disseminate those results.
Maybe a MECC Palooza might be a...
All right, well, we're coming down to the last few minutes. So, Ted, I'm going to give you the last word.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I agree that the apathy was sort of set in. I think we need to kind of have a seat at the table, get involved, whether it's the Alliance, whether you're local organizations, talk to local academic centers, your local societies in your back door, and get engaged and involved. And I think, it kind of depends as a whole MECC community, how do we become more relevant is to be there. But I think, you have to look inside. We talked about that. How do you want to perceive yourself and portray yourself out there with your partners and your collaborators? So.
And I will, Derek also put two things up here that I'm going to kind of put in as well. Scott Weber would say, publish our outcomes. And the other thing is, vote for great MECC candidates currently on the Alliance board. We've got Stacy Miller from the France Foundation. We've got Scott Weber. People who will be there as a voice for MECC. And I apologize if I forgot anybody that is there, but those two really jumped to mind. Put the people there.
Jamie from Medscape, too.
Yes. Yep. So with that, thank you to this great panel. This was a lot of fun. Again, three people that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Really enjoyed putting this together. And Derek and Scott, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. And I'll tag on to the end of that our 3 o'clock session today is on publishing outcomes data, led by Karen Roy. So be sure to tune in for that one. Thank you all. This was really great session. I think this sort of session is something you don't really get at the Alliance conference and that sort of thing. So I think it was a really interesting topic. I'm a little biased, I suppose, since I picked it. But anyway, and to finish up, let me give my little plug for, please, if you haven't already, take a look at the survey. It's right on the page where you're viewing this. It's 5 questions. It'll take you 30 seconds to do. Helps give us a better idea of how many people are participating and what areas who are watching CME Palooza. And last, this is a reminder, the next session coming up, it's our lunchtime panels session if you're on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, I guess it's the breakfast panel. Incorporating learning systems and quality improvement into continuing medical education. This is a special session sponsored by Genentech. That will be starting up right at noon Eastern time. I think the video link will actually be up around 11:55. You just have to refresh your browser and click play, and you're good to go. So once again, thanks all of you, and I will talk to you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.